Imagine waking up tomorrow with the ability to fly, no alarm traffic, no Uber surge pricing, no existential dread on Monday mornings staring at a bus stop. Sounds fantastic, right? Well, hold on to your feathers, because science has some extremely bad news for you, and it involves the words breastbone protruding 2 meters from your chest. Yes, you heard that right. This video is a full scientific breakdown of what it would actually take for humans to fly. And spoiler alert, the answer is both fascinating and deeply, deeply humbling. Let us start with a cold, hard physics, because the universe has no sense of romance. For an average adult, male weighing around 70 kilograms to achieve genuine flapping flight, he would need a wingspan of at least 6.7 meters, roughly the length of a large pickup truck sticking out from each arm. And that calculation does not even account for the weight of the wings themselves. Birds pull this off because they have hollow bones, air sacs connected to highly efficient lungs, and flight muscles that make up between 16 and 35% of their entire body mass. Humans, by comparison, have dense, marrow-filled bones and chest muscles so unimpressive that we struggle to do 10 pull-ups at the gym. Nature, it turns out, had absolutely no intention of giving us a shortcut to the sky. Now, if we are going full hypothetical and reimagining human anatomy from scratch to make flight biologically possible, the changes required are nothing short of terrifying. First, our bones would need to become hollow and dramatically lighter. Which sounds cool until you remember that bone marrow is where the body produces red blood cells, meaning hollow-boned humans would likely be chronically anemic. Second, our pectoral muscles would need to be so massive that researchers estimate the human sternum, the breastbone in the center of your chest, would need to project outward by nearly 2 meters to anchor all that muscle. To put it plainly, a flying human would look less like an angel and more like a living battering ram waddling through the world. Your dating profile would not survive the redesign. But wait, it gets even more interesting when you consider the neurological angle, because science always finds a way to make things weirder. Researchers have discovered that the ability of birds to synchronously flap both wings, rather than alternating them like humans do when walking, is tied to a genetic mutation involving a molecule called Ephrin B3 in mammals and reptiles. Ephrin B3 creates neural pathways in the spinal cord that dictate the classic left-right alternating motion of limbs. Birds appear to have lost or mutated this genetic coding, which allowed their nervous systems to develop the synchronized flapping circuits necessary for flight. In other words, the difference between you and a pigeon is not just wings and a complete disregard for personal space. It is also a fundamental rewiring of your entire nervous system. Now let us play the truly fun part of this thought experiment. What would the world actually look like if humans could fly? Forget airports, at least in their current form. City planning would be completely unrecognizable, since there would be no need to design roads and bridges as the primary pathways of movement. Real estate would undergo an absolute revolution, because height would no longer be an obstacle, it would be a luxury. Privacy would effectively cease to exist at ground level. Governments would immediately scramble to regulate airspace over neighborhoods. And you can be absolutely certain that someone would try to monetize the migration routes. On a darker note, warfare would be transformed entirely, and military strategists throughout history have dreamed of exactly that scenario, which is, ironically, one of the main reasons humans invested so heavily in building aircraft instead of waiting for evolution to catch up. Here's the punchline that brings this whole thought experiment back to reality. Humans did not evolve for flight, and according to the scaling laws of physics, we almost certainly never would have through natural selection alone. We are simply too heavy, too dense, and too dependent on our arms for tool use and manipulation to have ever traded them in 4 wings. But here is the genuinely remarkable thing. We figured out powered flight anyway. The Wright brothers achieved the first controlled, sustained, manned-powered flight in 1903, barely a century ago, which is less than a blink of an eye on the evolutionary time. Birds spent roughly 150 million years perfecting their anatomy. We spent a few thousand years thinking about it, and a few decades actually building the solution. So while we will never sprout wings, The fact that a creature with no biological right to be in the sky now routinely launches metal tubes carrying hundreds of people across oceans at 900 kilometers per hour is, scientifically speaking, far more impressive than anything new evolution would have handed us anyway.